Powell's death robbed this country of one of its greatest film directors. A couple of years ago, he made a film for the South Bank Show, of which he was very proud. So pleased with it, in fact, that he took away its director, David Hinton, to work on his next film with him as co-director. He was involved with the film throughout, a delight to work with, and as he would have wanted, we haven't touched a foot of it, not even the original introduction. This week sees the publication of A Life in Movies, an autobiography by the film director Michael Powell. The films Powell made with his partner, Emmerich Pressburger, such as The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, Black Narcissus and The Red Shoes, are unique in British cinema, and almost every young British director now claims them as inspiration. Powell's work, always imaginative, often surreal, bizarre and fantastic, challenges the usual ideas of what British cinema might be. His story traces a very un-English obsession with film.
All my life I've loved running water. One of my passions is to follow a river downstream until it reaches the sea. Today that sea lies before me in plain view, and it's time to start the story of my life. To remount it to its source, before I swim out, leaving behind the land I love so much into the grey, limitless ocean. Yet, although I love grass and trees and woods and forests, with the passionate love of an Englishman for his island, I shall not be afraid to swim out over those awesome depths. I've seen men and women far better and cleverer than I, crippled by illness, killed by chance. I've been allowed to reach the summit at which I aimed, in a profession that never existed until we invented it. Peeping Tom speaking. I live the cinema. I chose the cinema, or the cinema chose me, when I was very young. Everything I've had in the way of education has been through the cinema.
Mark, what a beautiful little boy. Who is he?
Me?
Of course it is. Then who took this film?
My father.
Peeping Tom is a film I made in 1959, and it's about a young man who grows up in terror.
What's that? Mark, what are you doing?
Wanted to photograph you watching.
No, no.
His father's a scientist who's interested in scoptophilia, which is the morbid urge to gaze. And he's also interested in the reflexes of fear. He uses his son as a guinea pig and films his reflexes.
But what's he doing?
Giving me a present.
What is it?
Can't you guess? A camera.
When the boy grows up, he becomes a murderer who stalks his victims with a camera and films the fear on their faces.
Every night you switch on that film machine. What are these films you can't wait to look at? What's the film you're showing now? Why don't you lie to me? I'd never know.
You would know at once.
Take me to your cinema.
Yes.
What am I seeing, Mark? Why don't you answer?
It's no good.
The young man approaches life like a director. He's a technician of emotion. And I myself am thrilled by technique. I'm always mentally photographing and cutting the scene that unfolds in front of me. So I was able to share his anguish.
Helen! Helen! I'm afraid.
No, Mother!
And I'm glad. I'm afraid.
Obviously, Michael Powell made Peeping Tom in order to shock. In one sense, he has succeeded. I was shocked to the core to find a director of his standing befouling the screen with such perverted nonsense. It wallows in the diseased urges of a homicidal pervert and actually romanticizes his pornographic brutality.
The word for Michael Powell's Peeping Tom is quite simply nasty.
It exploits fears and inhibitions for the lowest motives.
Peeping Tom stinks more than anything else in British films since The Stranglers of Bombay.
The only really satisfactory way to dispose of Peeping Tom would be to shovel it up and flush it swiftly down the nearest sewer. Even then, the stench would remain.
If the producers had had the courage of a louse, Anglo Amalgamated and National Film Finance Corporation, they would have done what other producers have done before. They'd have taken space in the papers. They would have printed all the worst reviews, and they would have said, come and see for yourself. I believed in the film. They didn't. They withdrew it, and I heard that it was sold to some cheap jack in America for television. It vanished for 20 years, and I vanished with it. I was no longer bankable. I was too independent. I wanted my own way. I'd grown up. Audiences had grown up. Films had stayed in the nursery.
Giving the bluntest of cheap thrills.
Perhaps if I tell the story of my life the way it was, I can justify it. Justify my life in movies. Hello, Mum. My mother was a good photographer. She used a box brownie, like this one. She made some pretty good pictures, Mum did. This is me with my pony, Fubsy. I was a dreamy boy, given to long reveries, during which I saw and heard nothing. My temple was the public library. My first thing was always to check down the Jules Verne's. They were all full of illustrations, and this is when it dawned on me for the first time that I had an eye. In January 1921, I saw a copy of a new magazine called The Picture Goer. I opened it and started to read. Somehow, the journalist had managed to convey the camaraderie of a film unit, the complete absence of any class distinction. And the aim was art, to go out into the real world and turn it into a fantasy world where anything could happen. This was for me. From now on, I knew that I was born to be a film director. I became a film buff.
Among the films particularly admired by Powell were the spectacular exotic works of director Rex Ingram, films such as The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and The Prisoner of Zenda. In 1925, Powell joined Ingram's latest production, Mare Nostrum, which starred the director's wife, Alice Terry. He worked as an assistant stillsman. This is one he took of Ingram. The film was produced for MGM at the Victorine Studios in the south of France.
When Rex Ingram and Howard Strickling and Harry Lackman said to me, stick around in Nice, I stuck. I should be so lucky. I was with a big American company working in Europe. Discipline was lax, and I had the run of all the departments. No studio police around. I was in the art department, the camera department, everywhere. But my favorite was the cutting room. And gradually, I learned to know the picture, frame by frame. People more and more are looking at the old films to see what they missed. What they missed was romance, mime, passion. This is an original Bell & Howell camera used on Rex Ingram's production of The Garden of Allah.
Powell acted for Ingram in The Garden of Allah, playing, appropriately enough, an English tourist. He was bottom of the cast list, but was able to develop the role when he left Ingram to work on a series of comic travelogues set on the Riviera.
My mentor in slapstick was Jimmy Gleason. He was great, and he taught me a lot, particularly about timing. I used to watch him on the set. I was shooting stills. I'd see him marking his script, and he'd be writing 1, 2, 3, do, D-O, do. So I said, Mr. Gleason, he said, yes, Sonny? I said, you just marked your script 1, 2, 3, do. What does it mean? He looked at me. He said, Sonny, that wasn't 1, 2, 3, do. It was 1, 2, 3, do. Look, I'll show you. I'm the plumber, see? I come to fix the bathtub. I put down the old bag of tools on the table, and I hear a splash. Could it be a splash? I turn. I see the girl in the bath. 1, 2, 3. The man! Hello? When I arrived in London in 1928, it was like a foreign city to me. The only shoes I had were sandals. The only name I knew was Alfred Hitchcock. I got a job with Hitchcock later on, shooting stills. And after a couple of pictures, we wrote a script together. Blackmail, the first English talkie. The old British film industry was churning out quota quickies, poverty row productions at about a pound a foot. I cut my teeth as a director on one of these. I was 26 years old. It was a murder mystery and called 2 Crowded Hours.
Within a week, Powell was directing his second quota quickie, Rhinox.
Give me that letter.
Despite the lowly status of these films, Powell's talent was quickly spotted by critics. Over the next 5 years, he made 20 more low-budget films.
But in my heart, I knew that my films were rubbish. I knew I was looking for a real Michael Powell subject. A realistic subject, but with a chance for some poetry in it. And all the time, I had a dream of the Hebrides. I collect islands. I like them, I love them. And whenever I hear of a new island and a new piece of water, I have to go there.
Andrew?
Aye?
Stand by, we're putting in.
So when I read about the evacuation of St. Kilda in the Hebrides, I thought, this is the story for me. This is the film I want to make. Nobody could understand why I wanted to make a film on an island when I was in demand for making thrillers. I tried to explain, and they said, oh, you mean like Robert Flaherty's Man of Arran? I was livid. I said, no, I don't mean Flaherty's Man of Arran. That's a lot of pretty pictures of seaweed and the sea and donkeys. No story. I want to make a drama with real people in it, where their whole lives are in danger. Documentaries are for out-of-work poets.
Edge of the World was particularly admired by the great Hungarian producer-director Alexander Korda. Korda had established his London Films Company in England and now offered Powell a contract working at his new studios at Denham.
There's nothing left of Denham Studios now, all gone, and a great glass box stands in its place. Korda's old house still stands there, but the roof has fallen in and there are only sad ruins of brick. It was here in the old house we had the story conference about a film called Spy in Black. Alex Korda was a genius at story conferences. He knew what he wanted, he knew how to get it, and he knew how to make the other fellow think he had thought of it. The producer was there, the English writer was there, and there was a rather smaller, anonymous character there. Alex lit a Corona and said, now, Emmerich Pressburger has a few things to say about the script. Emmerich, perhaps you will let us hear what you think about the script. Emmerich felt in his pocket and he produced his version of the script. This is it. It was a nice little rolled up piece of paper and he unrolled it and he read the first scene. And I was spellbound. I just listened while he went on reading and unfolding it and unfolding it and unfolding it. He'd stood the story on its head. He'd turned a man into a woman into a man. He'd altered the suspense. He'd rewritten the end. I looked at the producer, he was purple in the face. I looked at the writer, he was prepared to faint. And I was just rejoicing that I was going to work with somebody like this, and that I wasn't going to let him get away in a hurry either.
Powell and Pressburger were to work together as a team for the next 18 years. In 1942, they formed their own production company, The Archers, and from then on, they shared a unique screen credit, written, produced, and directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger.
I don't know who suggested the famous trademark, but I remember saying to Emmerich one day, "You ought to know this jingle by James Agee. It goes, 'The arrow was pure gold, but somehow missed the target. But as all golden arrow trippers know, it's better to miss Naples than hit Margate.'" But that was in the future. Back in 1939, Hitler was rattling his saber, war was drawing nearer every day, and we were all working here at Denham on Corder's Arabian fantasy, The Thief of Baghdad.
The lash that descends, the yoke that breaks, and the sword that slays, by the power and terror of these, you may conquer the earth.
Lift yourselves, winds of heaven, lift till you wail aloud.
And from the ranges of the sky, he shall destroy this tyrant with the arrow of justice.
Corder promised Churchill that if war was declared, the next day he would turn the whole of Denham's resources over to making a propaganda film and have it out within 1 month. In return, he asked that the British film industry should be regarded as an essential war weapon. He got his agreement. The Lion Has Wings was an outrageous piece of propaganda. It was full of half-truths and half-lies. There were some stagey episodes which were rather embarrassing.
And the commanding officer of the bomber station addresses his officers. A striking contrast to the friendly atmosphere that is Britain's way.
Haben Sie es verstanden? Die Befehle, Herr Oberst. Danke, meine Herren. Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler!
Still, the will to fight was there.
Memo from Ministry of Information. Program for film propaganda.
Feature films of the present war are already being made by private companies. A film on contraband is well underway.
Heave to immediately. Let them come and get me.
When we made Contraband at sea, the message was to Admiral Dönitz that in spite of his U-boats, if neutrals brought in contraband by sea, they would be arrested and probably impounded.
A film being a popular medium must be good entertainment if it is to be good propaganda. Film propaganda will be most effective when it is least recognizable as such.
Mrs. Sorensen, have you ever been put in irons?
No. I use my legs.
Go on.
I'd been preparing for a leading role in my profession for 13 years, and now I was offered opportunity after opportunity, and I took them with both hands. On 49th parallel, I found myself dealing with governments and pushing whole countries around in the cause of an epic idea. Our intention was to make a melodrama that would bring America into the war. Tall order. But it didn't seem impossible in 1940.
6 fugitive Nazis stranded on Canadian soil, determined to reach neutral territory.
We were able to get big stars to collaborate with us, and we shot our way across Canada and back. All the Powell-Pressburger wartime films were original stories, written for the screen, trying to keep pace with events and putting into action what the ordinary person was thinking.
Can you hear them running for shelter? Can you understand what that means to all the occupied countries? To enslaved people having it drummed into their ears that the Germans are masters of the earth? Seeing those masters running for shelter, seeing them crouching under tables, and hearing that steady hum night after night, that noise which is oil for the burning fire in our hearts.
The influence brought to bear by the ministry on the producers of feature films must be kept secret.
Prime Minister, I attach, as directed, a note on the blimp film, which is in course of being produced and which I think it of the utmost importance to get stopped. James Grigg, Secretary of State for War. The film begins with a collision between a young officer of today and Major General Clive Candy, aged 66.
You're an extremely impudent young officer. But let me tell you that in 40 years' time, you'll be an old gentleman too. And if your Billy keeps pace with your head, you'll have a bigger one than any of us.
Maybe I shall in 40 years, but I doubt it. And I doubt if I'll have time to grow a moustache like yours, sir. But in 1983, at least I shall be able to say that 40 years ago, I was a fellow of enterprise.
The film then goes back to 1902, when the general himself was a subaltern with a similar intolerance of his elders, and impetuous enough to embarrass the British embassy in Germany by fighting a duel with a German officer.
Boss!
Then it traces his progress across the years in various parts of the British Empire, and so to the War of 1914-18.
The Germans have accepted the terms of the armistice. Hostilities cease at 10 o'clock. It's nearly that now. Murdoch, do you know what this means?
I do, sir. Peace. I can go home. Everybody can go home.
For me, Murdoch, it means more than that. It means that right is might, after all. The Germans have shelled hospitals, bombed open towns, sunk neutral ships, used poison gas, and we won. Clean fighting, honest soldiering have won.
Candy's attitude between the wars is a lack of comprehension as to why the Germans cannot realize that they were fairly and squarely beaten, and there is no reason why they should not make and remain friends.
Teo.
Whatever the film makes of the spirit of the young soldier of today, the fact remains that it focuses attention on an imaginary type of army officer which has become an object of ridicule to the general public.
Pray propose to me the measures necessary to stop this foolish production before it gets any further. I'm not prepared to allow propaganda detrimental to the morale of the army. And I'm sure the Cabinet will take all necessary action. Who are the people behind it?
What was your reaction to what Churchill called this foolish production, his attempt to stop it?
We didn't bear any malice to Churchill. We knew he was mainly responsible for us all being reserved to make films during the war. At least he knew films were a real weapon.
So you were going to go and make the film anyway. Did you feel sympathetic to Blimp as a character?
Oh, yes, I identified completely with him. Lots of things are exactly like me.
Such as?
Couldn't be more English. I was sentimental and loved women and dogs. I'd always felt enormously sympathetic with that kind of man. and, you know, honorable, puzzled, innocent, and doing a great deal of harm with his puzzlement and his ignorance and his innocence. And I see myself very much like that.
Do you also see him as a romantic figure?
I don't think that I've ever felt romantic. I've always felt like the same small boy who fell in love with soldiers and had a pony when he was 8 or 9. And, very innocent, really.
I was in love with her, your wife.
She never told me.
She never knew.
But I seem to remember, oh, Clive, that last day in Berlin when I told you, you seemed genuinely happy.
Dash it, I didn't know then. But on the train, I started to miss her. On the boat, it was worse. And by the time I got back to London, well, I'd got it properly. My Aunt Margaret got onto the scent straight away. Women have a nose for these sort of things. Besides, I did a stupid thing. First night back, I took out her sister.
Aunt Margaret?
Edith's.
Oh, Martha?
Yes.
What is stupid about that?
Thinking her sister would be like she was?
Like Edith?
Yes.
Well, you got over it?
That's just it. I never got over it. Theo, this may sound a damn silly thing to say to you, but I never got over it. You may say that she was my ideal. If she were some sort of sickening, long-haired poet. All my life, I've been looking for a woman like her. So now you know.
Well, of course, Emmerich couldn't write real English dialogue. He wrote wonderful dialogue. His scenes were always the right shape. But it was up to me to make them what they were in the way of Englishness, you know, the revealing things, the little things about English men and women. And naturally, in writing the scripts, the final English dialogue script was mine.
When you say you always got the shape right, is there any more to be said about that?
Well, you can't have higher praise, really. I always say about an actor or an actress, he or she can't possibly play that part. They're the wrong shape for it. And it's much the same with a scene. He always saw the whole thing at one moment. I often had to discover it. There was one or two famous occasions when I directed a whole sequence, not quite understanding it, and only found out afterwards what it was really about. Michael, he would say, don't you realize? No, really, you're far too clever for me.
Can you say what you think is most exemplary about the script?
Most exemplary? I think the love story.
Here's to the happiness of my fiancée, who was never my fiancée. And here's to the man who tried to kill me before he was introduced to me. Prost. May I kiss the bride?
Why ask? I did not ask.
Goodbye, Clive.
Goodbye, Edith, old girl. I hope we'll meet again sometime.
I'm sure we shall.
In the film, Blimp has a relationship with 3 women. The English governess in Berlin, the young Yorkshire nurse whom he marries, and then the young driver who drives him around in the Second World War. They're all played by the same woman, Deborah Kerr. How would you describe Blimp's attitude towards the woman in the film?
Oh, blind worship. I thought the little scene, that's an answer to your question. There's a little scene I played at the fireside with the spaniel snoring, you know, and he hums, and she says, don't hum. Emmerich was furious at this. Emmerich, I hope you're watching. Furious at this because he said, if my wife said to me, don't hum, you know, I would hit her.
Darling, don't hum.
Was I humming?
Mm-hmm. It's a little habit you've got.
Well, what do I do if I don't hum?
You said at the outset that you knew what you wanted to do with Blimp. Did you do what you wanted to do? Did you achieve what you wanted? Which was what?
Oh, make a wonderful love story and then fall in love with the girl myself. With the worldwide success of Colonel Blimp, we'd had 7 successes in a row, but the gods were already smiling. We were planning a Canterbury Tale. We wanted to explain to the Americans and to our own people the traditions and the spiritual values we were all fighting for. I'm pretty sure that it was I who had walked the Pilgrim's Way many times that suggested the leading characters should be pilgrims to Canterbury. Along the way, they encounter a loony squire who pours glue on girls' heads at night to stop them going out with soldiers. This strange fanatic looks on himself as the guardian of English virtues.
But there are more ways than one of getting close to your ancestors. Follow the old road, and as you walk, think of them and of the old England. They climbed Chillingbourne Hill just as you did. They sweated and paused for breath just as you did today. And when you see the bluebells in the spring and the wild thyme and the broom and the heather, you're only seeing what their eyes saw. You ford the same rivers, the same birds are singing. When you lie flat on your back and rest, and watch the clouds sailing, as I often do, you're so close to those other pilgrims that you can hear the thrumming of the hoofs of their horses and the sound of the wheels on the road and their laughter and talk and the music of the instruments they carried.
I suppose the film is a kind of morality play, whatever that may mean, which ends with all the pilgrims on their way to Canterbury to receive their blessings. Only the fanatical squire receives no blessing. He has tried to play God, and the part of God is the lonely one.
Pilgrims for Canterbury, all out and get your blessings.
Rum sort of pilgrimage for you. A pilgrimage can be either to receive a blessing or to do penance. I don't need either. Perhaps you're an instrument. Do I get a flaming sword? Nothing would surprise me. I'll believe that when I see a halo round my head.
I was inspired by loyalty to place, loyalty to the narrow streets of Canterbury, the Christchurch Gate, and the great cathedral itself, standing in the green lawns of the precincts. Above all, I was inspired by gratitude and love for having been born a man of Kent. Canterbury Tale was one of our first failures. The values that we were discussing were old hat. Still, we loved the picture. By 1945, the war was nearly over, and Technicolor was with us again. Jack Beddington, who headed the films division of the MFI, sent for us and said, "You chaps are very ingenious. You think of your own stories, you write your own scripts. In fact, your films are more like sermons than anything else." I said, "Thanks very much." He said, no, look, surely Emmerich can think of a way to make a film to show the Americans and the English that they love each other.
I want to be alone with you, June. Where were you born?
Boston.
Mass?
Yes.
That's a place to be born. History was made there. Are you in love with anybody? No, don't answer that.
I could love a man like you, Peter.
I love you, June. Your life, and I'm leaving you. Where do you live? On the station?
No, in a big country house about 5 miles from here. Lee Wood House.
Old house?
Yes, very old.
Good, I'll be a ghost and come and see you. You're not frightened of ghosts, are you? It'll be awful if you were.
I'm not frightened.
What time will you be home?
Well, I'm on duty till 6. I have breakfast in a mess, and then I have to cycle half an hour. I often go along the sands. This is such nonsense.
No, it's not. It's the best sense I ever heard. I was lucky to get you, June. Can't be helped about the parachute. I have my wings suit anyway, big white ones. I hope they haven't gone all modern. I'd hate to have a prop instead of wings. What do you think the next world's like? I got my own ideas.
Peter.
I think it starts where this one leaves off. Or where this one could leave off if we'd listened to Plato and Aristotle and Jesus. With all our little earthly problems solved, but with greater ones worth the solving. I'll know soon enough anyway. I'm signing off now, June. Goodbye. Goodbye, June.
Hello, G for George. Hello, G. George. Hello, G. George. Hello.
So long, Bob. I'll see you in a minute. You know what we wear by now, prop or wings.
Of course, David falls in love with the girl, and the question now arises, will he be allowed to live with her and love her in this technicolor world of ours? Or will he be called into the other world, which is in black and white, and where he's already been reported dead?
You'll proceed to Earth immediately?
Oui, madame.
You'll explain your grave error to Squadron Leader Carter?
Oui, madame.
And ask him to follow you?
Oui, madame.
Wait! Your captain is not an unreasonable man, I hope.
The skipper? Oh, no, ma'am. Unless he's had a few, of course. Pardon? Had a few? Beers. Oh, de la bière. Oui. Scotch being hard to come by, you know. Naturellement. By the way, monsieur, when you see Peter, would you give him a message for me? Avec plaisir. Just say, what ho? Bon.
When he's starved for Technicolor up there. What a night for love.
So when Marius Goring in the film comes out in the rhododendrons and says, one is starved for Technicolor up there, everybody roars their head off. And it works. And after that, I knew I could do almost anything. I knew there was no realism in films, only surrealism. With A Matter of Life and Death, we had returned to the big show, the kind of film for which the movies were invented. I dreamt of challenging Hollywood with vast epics. Instead, I found myself in the Himalayas, making a film about nuns. It was Black Narcissus, and our mountains were painted on glass. Usually the thing was in those days, you sent a unit out on location. They came back or they didn't come back. Usually they brought quite a lot of stuff. It never worked really well. We decided to do the whole thing in the studio. And that's the way we managed to maintain color control to the very end. When I come to a film, it's usually been well prepared, and I start working carefully, methodically, and without inspiration. Sometimes in a film, its theme or its color are more important than the plot. We dress the nuns in white or off-white, quite intentionally to bring down the key of the color. People say that Black Narcissus is a very erotic film. I don't know. Maybe it is. All I do know is that it's full of wonderful performances and passion just below the surface. But finally, at the end of the film, erupts.
You say that because you love her! I don't love anyone!
When I made Black Narcissus in 1946, I was already groping my way towards a new kind of film, what I called a composed film, a combination of music, action, dialogue, but the music being the master. There was one sequence in particular where Kathleen Byron stalks Deborah Kerr, which was almost entirely shot to music. We rehearsed it, then recorded the music, and scene by scene, we shot the film to the music. It was opera in the way that the music, the images, the voices, the acting all blended into a splendid whole. It worked. It worked. I could hardly believe my eyes. Filmmaking was never the same for me again after that. And when Red Shoes came up the year following, and Brian Easdale was the composer on that, then we worked out the whole ballet to be a composed film.
The Red Shoes was based on a fairy tale by Hans Andersen. The girl longs to dance in the red shoes, but once she puts them on, she can't stop dancing until she dies.
I wanted to make a real theatre fantasy, always drenched with the theatre, not nowhere, but on a stage, only a stage that took in the whole world. This is the actual little sequence that Massine choreographed himself. It was pretty raw, like a fairy tale should be. And in 42 seconds, he packed so much emotion and movement. Flung her there, up there, and we shot it like this.
Now, this is the tension between the man she's going to marry, wants to marry, does marry.
Marry scoring, yeah.
And the Diaghilev figure.
Anton Walbrook. They always call him the Diaghilev character, but it was just as much Corder or me. There are lots of impresarios like that. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you're one.
Not in the slightest. I'm a gentle, approachable chap who tries to interview impresarios like yourself.
Oh, so was he, but he just tore people apart as well.
Good evening, Mr. Craster. Won't you be missing you at Covent Garden tonight?
Monsieur Lermontoville est moins dit.
Oui, je sais.
Oh, for God's sake, leave me alone, both of you. Please, Julian, wait until after the performance.
It'll be too late then. You are already too late, Mr. Craster. Tell him why you've left him.
I haven't left him.
Oh, yes, you have left him. Nobody can have two lives, and your life is dancing.
Vicky, you can dance anywhere else in the whole world.
Would you be satisfied with anything less than the best? If you would never be a great artist. Perhaps you never will. And would you make her a great dancer as well? Never. Why do you think I've waited day after day since you snatched her away from me for a chance to win her back?
Because you're jealous of her.
Yes, I am. But in a way that you will never understand.
Were you trying to say things about artists and art and film as an art and that sort of thing, which you do mention again in your writing? And what were you trying to say there?
Just the sky is the limit, that art is something worth dying for.
And here in this sequence, that's exactly what she does. She decides to put on the shoes.
And the shoes run away with her down the steps. And when we came to the balustrade where she's supposed to jump over, that was her dive to death. Wonderful, isn't it?
And this got you in a lot of trouble with the critics.
Yes,
the fact
I'm
that her
afraid
smashed-up body shown at the end of the film. You got a
Not
very hostile
only
reception.
did Michael Powell not give us a happy ending, not only did he kill the ballerina, but he shows us in gory detail how she was killed. I said, but it is a happy ending. She died for her art. Well, after all, you know, if a girl throws herself from a height onto a rubber line and the train runs over her, you would expect a certain amount of blood. But it really upset them, that the sudden realism of it, which was so moving.
Why do you think it was so important for you to show somebody dying for their art? One way it's a fine idea, and another way it's a morbid idea. Why were you so attracted to demonstrating it through this fairy tale?
I don't think it's morbid. I think because I would do it myself.
Really?
Hmm. Don't believe me.
Julian,
Yes, my darling.
take off the red shoes.
On the whole, the critics were not unenthusiastic about the film. However, it was another matter when we showed it to John Davis and Arthur Rank. All they could see was that it was an art film. And art films do not spell money. They told us that they were going to put it on show for 1 week, yank it, and put it on the shelf. We protested, we couldn't do anything with them. And it was only later, after Red Shoes had run for 2 years in a theater off Broadway, that they thought they might have been mistaken. In the end, it proved to be the most successful film we ever made. End of Vol 1. I'm 82, and in the book I'm only 43. We'll have to have another volume, won't we?